Motley Fabric. Today I'm going to give you the ultimate tutorial on the do-it-yourself pleated face mask. I've got the pattern from Veil Health and you'll find a link to it down in the description. It's got a pocket for a filter, a removable wire so you can mold it to your nose. I'm showing you 4 ways to do this pattern with a sew-in elastic, sew-in ties, longer bias tape ties, and even adjustable elastic. So no matter how you're trying to make your mask, you'll find something in this video that will help you. And by the way, how cute is this polka dot pattern? It's on Spoonflower by my sister-in-law Gianna, and you will find a link to it down in the description. Let's have a quick review of the materials we need for the masks before we get started. So they all start with the same thing, 2 pieces of fabric that are 8 across and 7 down. For my masks, I like to have the front and the back be 2 different designs. I typically go with a solid for the back, but this is so that I can tell at a glance which side is which. This particular one is going to have long ties, and so I made some 1/2" bias tape. If you'd like a quick tutorial on a really neat method that uses straight pins at the ironing board, I have a link to that in the description. And this is a little bit of a cheat. It's not true bias tape. I cut it on the width of the fabric, but I think for the masks that's going to be fine. And then of course you can also buy some. So this is the 1/2", and you want to make sure you get the double fold, okay? The other type, this next type of mask is a sew-in tie, and I just used some trim that I happened to have in the store. It was a 1" poly blend, and I just pressed it so that it would be 1/2", because that's what I like, but you know, you do you. Other options for the sew-in ties or the long ties are things like twill tape. This is a natural cotton twill tape. It comes in other materials and other colors. And grosgrain's kind of fun. Grosgrain ribbon, like this one here, has a fun edge on it. And then you can also get them with cool little designs and different things that will coordinate with whatever fabric that you have on hand. Next is the sew-in elastic. So I have 2 pieces of elastic that are 8 inches. And then I've also used, this is 1/4" elastic, and I've also used 1/8 inch. And for the adjustable elastic, it's a little bit longer. And this is 12 inches. I have 2 of those. And you can see I have 2 pieces of the bias as well. And then they'll all call for a nose wire. I've tweaked the pattern a little bit, so this is removable. You know, use it if you want to, if you don't want to. And of course you need your thread, your pins, or maybe some clips if you have them, scissors, and then I always have a little seam ripper there. So these are all the materials that you need. I'm going to go ahead and show you the first step, and every style of mask is going to share this step. So you take your top fabric and you turn it right side down, and then let's say this is the top of it, okay? So what you're going to do at the ironing board is press a little more than a 1/4 inch. It doesn't have to be exact. So that's kind of nice about this mask pattern. It doesn't have to be perfect. So for now, I'm just going to finger press it just to show you. And you fold it over once more, okay? And that's going to go the whole length of this piece of fabric, and you're going to do it for the back piece as well. Then for the front, you take a pin, and about 1.25" in from one side, you're going to put a pin. And then you're going to put another pin about 1/2 inch away from that. Okay, so I'm going to take this over to the ironing board. I'm going to press it. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and sew it, and then I'll meet you back here and you'll see the results, and we'll move on to the next step. We're back from the sewing machine, and here you can see right here and right here were where my pins were. So I sewed, backstitch a little bit, then I skipped over, backstitch a little, sew through the end. So I have this gap right here, and that is where your nose wire will be inserted and removed. And the reason we did it about 1.25" was we're going to lose some to seam allowance a little bit maybe to trimming. We're going to lose some to ties if you have ties. We just want to make sure this is accessible no matter what style of mask you're doing. So for the next step, for sew-in elastic and sew-in ties, you take the top piece and you just lay it flat, and we're going to pin in the elastic. So just find a nice little spot right here. Sorry if there's background noise. They're doing some work in my building. We're going to turn this, make sure there's no twists, and pin it at the bottom. Now you can measure up from the bottom of this fabric and get the other side elastic in the exact same spot. Or if you're a tiny bit lazy like me, you can just go like this and go, yeah, okay, that looks good. And then pin it right there. So with elastic, you'll do this side as well. Okay. Just to show you with the sew-in ties, you take one end and pin it. With this particular product, I like to really give it some extra leeway, and then you would pin it in there. And if you recall, we have the 4 ties, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and make sure they're all hidden, tucked away safely on this fabric. So when we cover it and we sew around, it will be totally encased. That way when we flip it, it won't be trapped in our seam. So the back piece here, this is the right side, this is the wrong side. So we take right sides together, and I don't line up the tops perfectly. I like to nudge down the back a little bit. And this is so when you're wearing it, the back piece doesn't show. I think it just looks a little bit nicer. So then this is a step for everyone, and you just pin those 2 pieces together. I usually do 1 on each side. That looks pretty good. And of course, when you do it, you're going to be much more careful and have a lovely outcome. And then I flip it because I nudged that back piece down. See, I have this little bit that's showing. So when I sew and I use my 1/4 inch seam allowance, I sew on this side. So I can follow along and make sure that I am getting this top fabric within the seam. So I'm going to run over to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew along the sides, as everyone should do, and then I'll meet you back here for the next step. One thing I forgot to mention is that if you're doing the sew-in, I like to backstitch a couple times. I feel like it makes it a little bit more secure. So if you're doing the sew-in elastic or the sew-in ties, make sure you do that. So this step's for everyone. I'm going to trim it just a little bit to get a little bit closer, reduce the bulk of the mask. Because remember, this is going to be on our faces. We want it to be comfortable. All right. Make sure you don't knock out the seam. So just a little bit. We'll do this side. I need a new blade there. All right, and I'll do this side as well. There we go. So if you are doing elastic, when you turn it right side out, so the sew-in elastic will look like this. You're good. If you have sew-in ties, it's going to be those long ties. Okay, and if you're doing those the bias ties or adjustable elastic, it'll just be this little square. So I'm going to take us over to the the ironing board, and we'll press it, and I'll show you how to do an easy way to do the pleats. I've pressed it flat, and it's nice and warm, and we are ready to put in some pleats, and everybody's going to do this, whether you have sew-in elastic, sew-in ties, anything. Everybody's going to do it. So there's a lot of tools out there to help you get perfect pleats, or you could use a seam gauge or something like that, but I just kind of grab it and fold it down a little bit and then give it a slight press, just like this. Okay. And for this mask, we're going to do that 3 times. Now I've made quite a few, so I've got a pretty good method going. You know, I can kind of feel my way through, so it may take you a little bit of practice, but you really don't need any special equipment or anything to do this. And I'm going to do one more. That's hot. Hot tip, the iron makes things warm. All right, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a spritz of steam to really help it stay down. Now, when you look at the side, you can see the pleats. Sorry about that. There we go. You can see the pleats. And I'm happy with that. So we got them on the both sides. So if you have the sew-in elastic or ties, you're almost done. There's only one more step for you. And that is to take it to the machine and sew down the side. Remember to backstitch top and bottom. And then I have found the best visual results happen when your seam allowance from this edge is very consistent. So don't worry about going super straight. Follow along the line of the edge, and then you'll have the most attractive final results. For other folks who are doing the long bias ties or the adjustable elastic, it's a little more important for you to go straight. Okay, so I'm gonna go sew this, and then I'll come back and I have another one without the elastic, and we'll continue for those of us who either have the long ties or the adjustable elastic. And we're back. I've put my wire in, and now my sew-in elastic mask is done. And if you're doing the sew-in ties, it's going to look like this. So then our next steps are for the long bias ties or for the adjustable elastic. But real quick, if you are using ribbon for those long ties like this, you can see I just laid it on top, and then I used a zigzag stitch, and I didn't take very much care. You can see I skipped a few, but I just wanted you to get the idea here. And this is what it looks like on the back. If you have some cool stitches on your machine you've never used, this might be a good time. And here you can see I used pink on the front, and brown was my bobbin. So that's just a little detail you can experiment with. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is prepare this for either the long bias ties or these little pieces of bias for the adjustable elastic. And what we're going to do is trim this part. So we've got a little bit of bulk here at the seam, right? So we're going to get rid of that. And what you do is you're going to line up the top of the mask where the wire goes and trim off just a little bit. Be careful not to do the stitch line, but just that little bit of bulk. Let's see, I got all this off. Okay, and you're going to do that to both sides. And then for your long tape, you're going to find the center. And remember, it doesn't have to be exact. I don't have to measure it or anything. And then just lay your mask in, and then pin it. Okay, so I think I mentioned I'm a little bit lazy. So at the machine, for the ends of the ties, I just fold them over. That's all I do. And then I put it in the machine this way. Be sure to backstitch. And then I go all the way down, 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 down. And when I get to the mask, you really want to make sure that your front and the back pieces of your bias are lining up as much as you can. And then I always give them a 2 or 3 stitch back stitch because there's going to be pulling on there. We want to make sure it's good. And then you keep going all the way down to this end, and then you do the folding thing again. And then I like to flip it, put it in, and do another stitch line down this way. I think it makes it look a little more attractive, and I think it makes it a little more secure as well. Okay, and then before we go over there to sew it, I'm just going to show you real quick for these, the adjustable elastic bias pieces, what you're going to do is fold it over and kind of finger press it, right? We want to get this little indent here. So you're going to line it up, not exact, but a little bit lower. The mask will be a little bit lower than the indent. Then you take your scissors, cut down here, fold up the bottom, and now you've got this piece. And then of course you'd flip, and then you would do it for the other side as well. So I'm going to take this over to the machine, we'll sew it up, and then we'll move on to the last steps for the adjustable elastic. We're back, and I inserted my wire, and this one with the bias ties is all done. Here's my ends, so you kind of see how they turned out. And then this is my foot that I use. So you can see here, right? It's about 1/8 from the edges, and that's the way I did it. I found visually it's more appealing if on the front I'm really making sure it's even with the sides. Kind of tricks the eye. On the back, it doesn't quite matter as much as long as you're catching the tape. All right, so that's it. That's this one. Another one done. Oh, one other thing is I backstitch a little bit as I'm coming over the mask itself, because you know it gets pulled here and I want it to be strong and last for folks. So this one's done. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and I will show you for the last type of mask, the adjustable elastic mask, how we can get this on, but it's just the height of the mask itself, and how we're going to have the elastic going through. All right, we're on our last step. I did one side and trimmed it already, so you can get a sense of what it's going to look like. So I sewed the 2 little bias pieces like this, and all we need to do now is put it on. So fold it down toward the middle and lay your mask on top. Fold your other side and lay your elastic on top, and then fold it over. So I'm going to pinch it real tight here so you can see. We want to try and get these lined up as well as you can, and make sure you pull the elastic this way a little bit. I switched, and I've been using 1/8 inch elastic on this type of mask, just because there's less of a chance of me grabbing it with the stitch line. So let me put this in the machine. Okay. And then you just align the bottom one as well. Again, trying to get those edges lined up pretty well. And you can see here, I'm aligning the edge of my fabric with the edge of my foot. It can be a little bulky when starting out, so be aware, be familiar with your machine and how it handles that kind of thing. I'm going to go straight down. And then comes the big test, which is, does the elastic move within it? So then once you trim this and insert your wire, you're done with the elastic, the adjustable elastic. So here's what you do. To size it to you, that's the adjustable part. You're adjusting it to you. You take it, you do a knot. Make sure it's a loose knot. Once you do a knot in elastic, it's pretty hard to undo. So we just do a nice loose one. You figure out, you know, the size it needs to be. Then you just pull it till it makes a nice tight small knot, and you can then pull this, and the knot will get drawn inside of here. So it won't bother your ear, and it'll be pretty. And so that's how you complete the adjustable elastic style. And we're done.
And that's our video for today. Thanks so much for joining me. If you liked this tutorial, please give it a like, and to see more in the future, be sure to subscribe to the channel.